Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to demonstrate how to paint a Christmas themed polar bear on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. This tutorial utilizes a traceable that is free. You can print it and use graphite paper to transfer to your canvas. If you do not want to use the traceable, I'm going to go over this drawing quickly for you. So mine's already lightly drawn on the canvas, but I'm going to kind of give you some pointers if you want to draw the polar bear. So the nose is exactly in the center of the canvas. So the nose is kind of like a triangle that's upside down, and the corners of the triangle are curved. So find the exact center of your canvas and draw a little upside down triangle. And then you would do the mouth. So draw the mouth, so a kind of a vertical line down and smile on both sides. And then you would do the muzzle around the nose and mouth. So the muzzle is kind of like an oval shape that gets a little bit flatter at the top and then goes down. So if you were to measure this, or I can go ahead and measure this for you real quick. So it's about 3 inches, a little bit bigger than 3 inches tall. And then you can do the eyes above that. So 2 small oval eyes. And then you can do the head. So the head's got 2 curves around there. And then the ears. So just do a curve and a curve. And the ears, again, I've already drawn this lightly on my canvas. I'm just going over this darker so you can kind of follow along if you're drawing this without the traceable. So the ears of the polar bear are actually a little bit taller and curved, at least in this design. He's got some taller ears, but they're curved. And then you can do the inner part of the ear. Leave the top part open on his head for the Santa Claus hat. So the Santa Claus hat is kind of like a bumpy shape, rectangular shape on that kind of overlaps the top of the head. And our hat is a Santa Claus hat that goes down to a point. So it goes up and then curves. It goes down to the point. So the hat almost goes to the top of the canvas. So there's only a little bit of space left at the top of the canvas. And then we have our scarf. So that kind of goes to the, kind of overlaps the bottom part. It definitely covers the neck. And then our flyaways. And then we can do the body. So he's holding the cup. I recommend drawing the coffee cup first, and then we can do our little arms that are holding the coffee cup. So the opening of the cup's got like an oval and then 2 curved lines on the side. And then the little handle, you can draw the whole handle and the whole coffee cup first and then overlap the hands. So the arms, very basic curved arms that are overlapping the coffee cup. So he's holding that coffee cup, and that is it for the drawing portion. For the painting portion, we're going to paint the background first, and the background consists of 2 colors. We have turquoise blue and titanium white. I'm using the Liquitex Basics acrylic paints. If you don't have turquoise blue, you can use any blue for this. And I'm going to use a blender brush. So this happens to be a makeup brush. It's the e.l.f. brand blender brush. It works really great for painting. And if you don't have a blender brush, you can do the same technique with the 3/4 flat and just do like the little textured strokes. Basically, we're blending the turquoise and the white together just to get like a very simple blended background of the 2 colors. So you really don't need a lot of paint for this. I just did a little bit of turquoise, and you're gonna need like 2 dollops of white because our proportion of turquoise to white is like 2 to 1. So dip your blender brush in the water, and you'll want to squeeze all that excess water out because this brush holds a lot of water, and we don't want that much water to go on our painting right now. So I'm just squeezing all that extra water out, and it should not be dripping at all, but it should be wet. And that was the point of dipping it in, because it's a little wet, it's going to help with the blending. So look how I loaded that. I just put a little bit of the turquoise and a little bit of the white on there, and it's going to spread very easily on our background. So I'm just taking that and painting in circles and just blending those two colors together. So I'm just loading little amounts of the turquoise and little amounts of that white and just painting in circular strokes. And I'm going to fill up the background. So I'm going to go, obviously it's going to be very tedious if you don't go inside the lines of your drawing. I mean, you can, but it would be kind of hard to do that. So I'm going to do my best to fill in all the negative space, but if I accidentally go inside the lines like I'm doing now, that's okay. Just as long as you can still see your drawing, you will be fine. And as long as you don't go too far into the lines, you'll be fine, because we'll be painting our polar bear over anything that we might have painted over anyway. So I'm just going to fill up the background. Now I like a variety of colors. So I like areas that might be lighter, areas that might be darker. It just makes the background more interesting. If you want it to just be a solid color, you can. That's up to you. So like over here, a little bit darker, and then maybe we have white, a little bit lighter, and just kind of vary that. So we're doing circular strokes. It's blending together. I'm not pressing very hard on my bristles. I'm just lightly applying that paint to all the negative space. Then what I like to do is, if I have paint left on my palette, I'll utilize that for the sides of the canvas, just so to not waste that paint. We aren't using any more turquoise in this. So there it is, all filled up, sides are painted, and you will want to let this dry a little bit and then come back to this next step. It should dry very fast because it's a thin layer of paint. So we have primary blue and titanium white on the palette, and we're going to use blue and white to paint the polar bear, and I'll be using a number 8 round brush. So the blue is so that we can get some shading in our white, because it's a bear with white fur. It's going to be hard to like do some color variation. So we're going to use the blue to make our dark kind of shadowy areas of the bear. And you see me mixing a light blue on my palette. It's about a 3-to-1 proportion of 3 white to like 1 primary blue. It should be a light blue color. And I mixed that solid all the way on my number 8 round brush. And I'm starting with the muzzle. So I'm going to actually paint the inner outer part. So this part of that shape on the inside. I'm just taking my brush and pressing pretty hard. It should be a generous layer of paint because we'll be using that to blend. So this is the outer part. So this is going to be the dark part of our muzzle, and it's going to blend to a lighter color on the inside. So I'm just doing that. I'm going to grab white before this blue dries, and then I'm going to blend it. So that white is going to blend with that light blue. And I'm just going to paint in circular strokes. And basically, I want my muzzle shape here to get lighter and lighter as it goes inwards. And I'm painting in circles, grabbing more white on my brush. And I'm going to continue to paint in circles until the middle part is light. And yes, you'll be covering your nose, but I can still see my pencil drawing through that first layer of paint. So it should be fine. I'm just blending that in. Again, the darker part is on the outer inner part of that shape, and it's lighter on the inside. Okay, so this muzzle will stand out from the rest of him because this part is going to be lighter. So I didn't rinse my brush that time, and I just grabbed the white. If yours is turning to blue, I recommend rinsing it off and kind of starting over, because what I'm doing is I'm painting the head and I'm defining that shape. So especially where that background accidentally overlapped in there, I'm painting over that to make sure that white covers any of that turquoise. You might need to do a couple layers of white to do coverage, especially if your turquoise got really dark in that area. So a couple layers of white paint should do the trick to cover that up. And so basically, this head area is mostly white. There's little bits of blue in there because there was blue on my brush from the muzzle. That's okay. We can have a little bit of blue in that white. It's not going to make it turn blue. And so I'm just painting in circular strokes, filling in that shape of the head. Down there in the corner where that scarf is kind of a smaller area, you can use the tip of your brush. Painting over the eyes. I can still see those eyes through that first layer of paint. And I can paint over the Santa hat a little bit. So I'm going to utilize a little bit of blue. So I'm just grabbed a teeny bit of that blue on my brush and applied that blue at the top of his head, kind of under his hat. That little bit of blue will give our polar bear white some color variation. We'll do some fur texture later. Right now we're just doing the first layer of paint. So don't worry about adding texture or fur. We're just painting in the shape. I'm doing the ears. So defining that ear shape, especially where the background might have covered it. So I'm just making sure that ear shape is defined. I'm using white. If you want to add teeny tiny bits of blue to your brush, you can. Just make sure not to add too much blue. So just tiny bit right there on the tip. And like I dragged it out on the palette a little bit. It's not going to turn your white blue, but it will turn it very, very subtly, like a super white blue, and give your white some variation in color. And so that it'll make our polar bear look more interesting, more color in him versus if it was just solid white. So I'm just carefully defining that ear shape, making sure any part of the background that accidentally covered is covered, especially because our canvas is white. You want to just make sure that any part of the canvas is all covered up. I'm going to start doing the arms and chest area of the polar bear. Added a little bit more blue to my brush. I'm going to start by defining his arms. So right here, especially where the background might have overlapped. So I'm just taking my brush and defining that area. Again, there's just a little bit extra blue in there. And then I'm going to continue that down, making sure that drawing that shape is defined. Don't worry about fur texture yet. We're just filling it in. I'm going to add a little bit more blue. This is going to actually turn light blue. So the area that's behind the coffee cup, that's going to have a little bit more contrast. So I'm going to add more blue to that area. It would be a little bit darker than his white fur. So a little bit more blue in that area. And this area as well under his scarf. And I'm just kind of doing contouring strokes. It just means it's going in the direction of this shape. So right here, it's going curved. My strokes are going curved. So see how I created that contrast right there? So his paw, his arm is lighter. It stands out from the area of his chest that's behind the coffee cup. And so I'm going to do the same thing over here on the left. So his paw, his arm, more white, and then kind of behind where the coffee cup is, that's going to have more blue. And it just kind of blends together. So contouring strokes is going in a curvy direction. And then real quick, I'm going to fill up the negative space in the background on the bottom left that I missed. You aren't crazy because I did do that part earlier, but I switched samples between the first one and the second one when I went from the background to painting the polar bear. I switched samples and this one did not have that part of the background filled in. So I just did that really quick and I'm going to go back to what we were doing here. So contouring strokes. Make sure that that paw is curvy direction that has more white, but then behind it, so behind our coffee cup and next to our arm, we have the light blue color, and I'm doing kind of textured strokes, almost like I'm making the fur texture by doing that. Just textured, kind of expressive strokes in that area that blend to the arm, so it's kind of shadowy in that area, and we just want it to stand out because we want our arm to stand out. So just gently blend that with the blue, and we can go back over that later with some more texture if we need to. For the muzzle, I wanted to brighten up that center part really quick. That dried and it's not blending, so I'm just kind of forcing it to kind of dry brush blend into that. So I made that center part a little bit brighter. And I'm going to do some of the texture now. So I twisted my brush here to get that right on the tip of the brush. This number 8 round brush has a nice tip to it, so this I can do the texture with. If your brush doesn't have a tip to it, I recommend finding a small brush that has the tip because you really want that paint right there on the very, very tip of the bristles so that it creates that texture. So you see me kind of doing the fur edges, and the fur edge little lines go outwards, kind of really quick strokes to create that texture. I'm doing that just on the ears here, and it's just going in a contoured kind of curved direction for the shape, and it shows that texture that kind of goes on the edging of it. So the edge of the shape isn't solid, it's got some fur on the edges. And you can do the same thing for the sides of his head. So it's not going out very far. It's very, very close to that curve, but each of those fur pieces are curving downwards. So we don't want the fur to be super long. He's not a lion. We're not creating a mane here. We're just doing very subtle texture on each side of his head. Gives the illusion that he's furry. And if you wanted to simplify this and not do the fur, you can most certainly skip the fur part and simplify that. We're going to start working on the reds in this painting. So he's got the hat, the scarf, the inner part of his ear, and the color Naphthol Crimson is what I used. You can use any shade of red for this. This is just the red that I grabbed. And the number 8 round brush is what I'm going to use. So we're going to do the scarf, and I'm just going to paint the scarf in red. The direction of the stroke is going in the direction of the shape, so it kind of contours and curves with it. So it curves over here on the left, and then it kind of goes horizontal. And I'm just filling this in. So you can fill this in solid red, or you can grab a little bit of white on your brush and let the red and white blend together to create some color variation. So right there, just grabbed a little bit of white on the brush, and I'm letting that white gently blend with the red. Now keep in mind, I will be adding plaid pattern on this. So even if you did all this really pretty tinting with the white, made it look like it's got the folds and the wrinkles, is going to be disguised by the plaid pattern anyway. So you don't have to worry too much about adding too much detail with the scarf right now. We're just painting it in. So we have the flyaway part over here, and I'm going to try to, right here on the edging, I am creating that kind of frill on the edging. I'm just doing this very fast. I'm letting that paint run out. So I'm taking that brush and kind of sweeping it really quick on the edging, and that creates that dry brush feathery effect right on the edge. So just, you only need a teeny bit of paint on your brush to do that effect, and you just kind of quickly drag it outwards. And then the other scarf piece, I want to create a little bit of contrast with that so it'll stand out. So I added some white to my brush here, and this is not enough white to make it turn pink, but it's going to make it lighter at least. So right here, this part of the scarf, it's standing out because it's lighter. So I'm just doing the same thing, doing the frill. And then painting that rest of the scarf in. And see, because I utilized that white, that part of the scarf stands out from the other part of the scarf. So I'm just doing the rest of that red, and I'm just going to kind of gently blend that in. So there's our base of our scarf. This has to dry before we can do our plaid texture on it, or plaid pattern on it. So then we're going to move on to our hats. The hat's the same color, same red, and I'm going to fill that in as well, starting with just the red. So contouring strokes is going to go in the direction. I'm going to curve and go around that fuzzy part of the hat. We'll be using a different brush later to create the texture of the fuzzy part of the hat. And I'm going to go around the ears. So basically just filling the shape in. It gives pretty good coverage over that turquoise. In fact, it kind of makes it look like it's got some shading already, the part where it goes over that turquoise background. If your red is not doing a good job at coverage, you could do a couple layers or a couple coats of paint and see if that does coverage. Or you could also paint your hat solid white first. It takes extra time to do this, but painting it solid white first goes over the background, and then waiting for the white to dry and then doing that red over. That's going to make your hat look nice and bright and give good coverage. But for the most part, I didn't have any issues with my background interfering with my hat. In fact, it kind of gives me an advantage because it already makes it look like the hat has shadowing on it. So I'm just going to make sure everything's filled in and defined, especially where that background overlapped it. So another part of our painting that has the red is the inner part of the ears. So I'm going to mix about equal amounts of red and white together. A little bit more white, I suppose, because this should be a lighter color than our hat and scarf. It should be kind of a light to medium red. And I'm just going to fill the inner part of the ear in. I could also do a little bit of texture on the top part of it. So just like I did the texture on his ears and side of his head, kind of the same thing. So the edging, little tiny bits of strokes. I'm doing the same thing to the other inner part of the ear. So paint the shape first, and then use the very tip of your brush to create little textures on the outer part of that shape. And then if you want to add another color in there, so I grabbed a little bit more white on my brush, and I'm just going to add some little white textures on the top part of his ear. So just on the top part, it is blending with that red because that red's not dry. And same thing on the other ear. It's a little white textured strokes just on the top part of it. Blends gently with the white. Little white textured strokes. A little bit more white on the top part of it. So there's the inner part of his ear. Next, we are going to do the eyes and the nose and the mouth, and we're going to introduce Mars Black to our palette, and I'm going to use a number 4 round brush. So you'll need a smaller round brush for this, smaller detailed area, and I usually add a little bit of water to my Mars Black. It thins it out and it makes it easier to work with, so I can still see what I drew with the nose. So I'm just going to use that shape and fill it in solid black. We're not doing any shading or anything like that with the black. It is just a solid color. So I'm just painting that shape in solid. And then we can do the eyes. So you need a nice steady hand for these eyes, little ovals. And if they're not perfect, if they're not both the same shape, that is okay. It does not need to be perfect. So I'm going to just fill both of those shapes in with the solid black. When you get to the mouth, you want to really twist that brush, and when you twist it, it's going to gather all that paint right there on the tip, but also make your bristles nice and gathered together. Very steady hand. I'm not pressing hard at all to do the mouth, so very, very lightly. You can also grab a Sharpie or a paint pen for that step because it's a very thin line, and you have the option for doing that too. This step, a little bit advanced and optional. If you don't want to do this, you can skip it, but I'm going to do some more shading in the hat. So I already have some shading going on where that background was, but I mixed black and red together to make a very, 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 very dark red. In fact, that was a little bit too much black, so I went and added more red to it. So that line where that fold of the hat is, it just did like a diagonal line. I'm just doing some very subtle kind of diagonal strokes on the hat, on the left part of the hat over here, just a little bit. Again, this is not dark at all. Very dark red, but not black. So if this was black, it would kind of mess it up a little bit. So just a few little textured strokes on the hat. If it got too black, you can always go back in and add more red. Just kind of blend it in. So just where the fold is and just on the left part of his hat is where I did the shadowy part. So next, this is a fun part. I don't know why, but this was my favorite step. This is a bristle brush. It's a round bristle brush. I got it at Michael's. It's just a really cheap set of brushes. And I only use this brush when I want to do this kind of stippling texture. And so all I'm doing is loading that brush in the white, and I'm going to tap it to create the texture of the fuzzy part of his hat. So you're just tapping it, a relatively thick layer of paint. It'll take a while for it to dry. If you want to be advanced, add a teeny tiny bit of black. So see what happens when I just add a little bit of black in there, kind of create some shadow with that. It gives it some more dimension. And then we're going to move on to this. Just again, be very careful with the black. So if you're going to use the black to create some dimension in that, make sure you're only using a tiny bit because that black will take over fast. So same thing over here with the white. I'm just tapping it to create the fuzzy part of the bottom of his hat. Just taking that white, tapping it. The bristles of this brush are kind of a wiry texture. This technique would not work very well with a soft bristled brush. If you don't have a bristle brush, you can probably use some Q-tips. So get like a group of Q-tips and kind of rubber band them together and use that to tap, and creates that stippling texture effect. So you're just going to continue to tap the brush. That's it for now with the bristle brush. I'm going to switch gears here to my 4-round brush, and I want to add some more texture, fur texture, specifically inside the ears. I'm doing some more little white fur pieces that are kind of overlapping the pink part of the ears. And then the right side of the head as well, little fur texture pieces that might be overlapping part of that Santa hat. And then I'll do some more fur textures on the left side as well. And then I'm going to do the little dots inside of his eye. So I'm going to twist that brush, get the paint right there on the tip, and I'm going to do 2 little dots on the left side of both of his eyes. So it gives him a little bit of character. And then a little highlight on his nose. So one little comma stroke right there on his nose to highlight his nose. And then I'm going to do some more fur texture on the muzzle. So right here we have that light blue color again, so that primary blue mixed with the white. You can mix it on your palette again, but I'm doing little textures around his muzzle to give that fur texture right there. And then I'm going to do some more fur texture down here in the area kind of behind our coffee cup. So that same light blue color, I'm just going to purposefully add some textured fur strokes in that area. And then next I'm going to go ahead and paint the coffee mug. So you can do a different color if you want, but because this is a simplified color palette, I'm just going to go with the primary blue that I already have on my palette. So if you wanted to do purple or some other color, that's up to you. I'm just taking this primary blue and I'm still using the number 4 round brush, and I'm just doing contouring strokes. That means that the paint is going in the direction of the shape of the cup. And I have a little bit of white on my brush too, and I'm just kind of letting that white blend gently with that blue on the canvas. I'm going to freshen up my palette here with some more of that primary blue color. But you want to just fill it in. So curved strokes, these strokes are going around his paws, his hands, so that I can get that shape defined. But then in the middle of the cup, my strokes are going curved. And so I'm just letting that white kind of gently blend with the blue, but not over blend because I like the two-toned color look. And just doing curved strokes to fill in that coffee cup shape. When you do the curved strokes, it gives your cup some dimension. It makes it look kind of 3D because your strokes are going in a curved direction. Does not have to look realistic at all. And then I'm going to grab my Mars Black without even rinsing, and I'm going to paint the top middle part of that cup. So the opening is black. And then I'm going to add a little bit of black on the left side of our handle here. And then I can take that black and add a little bit of shadowing on the left side of this cup. Just be really careful with that black. It takes over so fast. So just blend it very, very gently with the blue if that's what you're going to do too. I want to do a little bit of white on the rim of the cup. And so I'm going to rinse and freshen up my white. I'm still using that 4 round brush. I'm going to touch up his paws as well. So if you painted over any part of the hands, you can go back over that and touch that up. Little bit of highlight right there on the top of that handle. For the rim, I'm going to make a light blue color here, but it's not going to give a lot of contrast because the fur of our polar bear is light blue. So it's not really standing out right there in that spot, but I can take that and outline this part right here. So that part will stand out, but then the other part in the back it needs to either be darker or lighter. So I can try to maybe make it gray to get that to stand out a little bit better. Next, I am going to show you how I did the plaid on his scarf. So for the plaid, you can do this with a round brush, but I actually found it helpful to use an angle brush for this. This is the 3/8 inch angle brush that's in the Princeton Velvet Touch brush set that I usually recommend. And so I'm going to use the Mars Black, and I'm going to water it down to almost a watercolor consistency. So this paint is thin, a little bit translucent because of the water, but it's going to be easy to work with and flow for these fine lines. That's why I thinned it out. I'm going to start by doing the lines that are going in the horizontal direction, but they're kind of wavy because the scarf itself is wavy. So I'm just holding the brush and using the tip of it. See how I'm using the angle brush, the tip, to create those fine lines. And so I'm just doing several lines going in this direction, kind of wavy, going across the duration of that scarf. So I was able to fit 4 lines across. You can maybe fit a 5th one down here at the bottom. You might have more or less. So we have 5 lines going across. And this isn't going to be like buffalo check plaid or any perfect plaid design. It's just going to be a simple plaid pattern. And then we're going to go vertical. So I can use this brush by holding it left and right, and I can create a thicker stroke by doing that. So I was able to do a thin stroke. Now I'm doing a thick stroke going in a vertical direction. Again, the scarf is kind of wobbly, so my vertical ones are not exactly vertical, they're kind of wavy. And then I can switch back to thin, and I'm going to do, let's do 2 little thin lines next to each other. So that's already looking like the simple plaid design. So we have a variety of different lines. So these ones are very, very thin. So I'm holding that brush very lightly, and I'm doing 2 verticals very close to each other in between the thick lines. So there is the part of the plaid, and a little bit, some of the lines were sticking out. I can go back and paint over that to kind of disguise it if I need to. I can grab that red and I can go back right here and just kind of try to disguise those little black lines that were sticking out at the bottom. A few of them were sticking out at the top, so I can go back and kind of disguise those as well. Or I could have let that dry and then grabbed white and then go back and paint back over it with the white, but that way seemed a lot quicker. So for the flyaways, I'm going to kind of just repeat the same thing. So maybe these ones are the 2 that are close together. So I'm doing the thin lines that are close together, and then thick. You use the thick by using the full width of the brush, and then thin. So I'm letting this paint run out kind of on purpose because I like how it's a little bit translucent. But then I'm going to go reload and make sure that it's still that watercolor consistency. So it's thin, it's flowy, but it's not drippy either. So if it was way too watery, that would be dripping down if I was using an easel. We don't want that. We don't want to mess up the painting by letting the black be too drippy. So just thin, but not dripping. And then I'll do the same thing to the other flyaway, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look exactly like the pattern of the other 2. It's just a basic plaid design. So I'll do 2 thicks, and then I'll do my thin, and then I'll do my pieces that are going in the other direction. Next, I'm going to do a design on the mug. So you can do any kind of design you want. I'm just going to do a simple heart. So I'll be using the 4 round brush and the titanium white, and I'm just going to paint a heart. The heart's going to be white first, and then I'm going to wait for the white to dry and then paint it over red. So it'll eventually be a red heart. And then we have the fun snowflakes in the background. So I'm just going to do a demonstration of how I do the snowflakes. This is the 4 round brush and the titanium white. So I always do like an asterisk. In other words, I do like an X, and then I do horizontal line across and vertical. So you have your lines, and then I'll decorate them. So sometimes I'll do like little curves on the vertical and horizontal, and then I'll do little carrot marks. It's two little diagonal lines on the tips of each of them, and then diagonal lines in the middle of some of the lines. So with the snowflakes, you can kind of vary that concept a little bit, and you can try to make them all different, or you can make them all the same. It's okay if you do that. But I just always start my snowflakes out with the base of the X, and then the horizontal and the vertical, and then I go from there and decorate the lines. So this one's going to be almost identical to the other one. I did little diagonal lines. I know all snowflakes are supposed to look different, but you can make them look the same. It's your painting. You can choose what you want to do. And little diagonal lines on those. So I'm just going to repeat that and do different snowflakes kind of all over the canvas, do different designs on them. This one will be slightly different, I suppose. And then you can also do little dots instead of snowflakes. You can just take your brush and just do little dots everywhere. So I like to make my dots go in clusters and not really spread out, but just clusters of little dots everywhere. Some of the dots are a little bit bigger, some are smaller, so kind of vary them all over. Next, I'm going to do a little bit more fur texture over here on the right. So I did the white, and I'm just doing the little fur pieces that are tangentially close to the shape of his arm. I guess you wouldn't see fur over here on the left because that scarf is overlapping, but if you wanted to, you can. And then we have our coffee cup steam. So the trick with steam is that we only need a little bit of paint on the brush. So there's only a little paint on the tip of my brush. That's how you get the dry, feathery look. It's got to look translucent, and you're barely pressing that brush on the canvas. It's got to be very, very translucent for it to look like steam. So if there was a lot of paint on my brush, it would be opaque and solid. We don't want that. We want it to be feathery, dry. So I'm dry brushing this steam. And so I'm just kind of sketching to create like a wave of the steam that comes from the opening, and it goes diagonally off to the side, off the canvas. So wavy lines, feathery, translucent. I'm pressing my brush pretty hard there, but there was only a small amount. So sometimes if you're dry brushing, you do have to press hard, because to get that paint to really get on the canvas, you gotta put some more pressure on it. But I'm just kind of doing some more little areas of steam, and I can vary it. So maybe some pieces of steam, there's a little bit more paint and it's a little bit more bright and white, but for the most part, everything is feathery and translucent. So I can see the color below that. And just a few more pieces. And then next I'm going to go in and paint my heart red. So I said I was going to make it red after that white dries. So I'm just going to freshen up some red on my palette and use my round brush to paint it red. The painting tutorial is almost to its conclusion. It's just a few touch-ups here and there, but the majority of the lesson is finished. So there's my heart, and I'm also going to do little white dots on top of that. Again, feel free to change the design. You're always welcome to change the tutorials and make it your own. You can change the colors, and that is always okay. I have people that ask me, is it okay if I do an orange scarf? And that's absolutely okay. You don't have to copy everything that I do. And you're most certainly welcome to copy everything I do too. So one last thing I'm going to do I'm going to do a little bit of shadowing under the hat. So there's not a lot of contrast where his head and hat is, towards the bottom of his hat. So I'm actually going to take my round brush and grab a little bit of black and white. So a little gray. So black and white make gray. And I'm just going to paint some gray dots right there at the bottom of the hat. So like a shadowy area that distinguishes where that hat stops and where his head is. And then I can take my bristle brush and just go in there and tap it, but I'm just blending that gray into the rest of the hat. So I'm not really going crazy with it, but I just did like a darker line that distinguishes the bottom. So you can kind of see what happened when I did that. But that was my final touch up for this painting tutorial, and it is coming to its conclusion. I hope you enjoyed painting a Christmassy polar bear with me. Fun, simple design. Thanks for painting with me, and thanks for watching.